I don't mean to be going verse by verse. That's not my intent. For some reason, it got kind of bogged down a little bit. We'll try to unbog.
You just need to focus. As long as
I need to focus. Focus. Well, sometimes it's really good to discuss. You know, we try to stay out of theological things, but it's really important and good to discuss things that people have questions about. You know, because that's the point, right? The theory of this class is because we just do history and, you know, culture and literature, that you can just ask whatever question you want, right? If it's not a theological question, it doesn't matter, right? So, you know, you might not be able to ask that question in another class, but you can ask whatever question you want, and we'll just see what historically we know about it, right? And if I don't have the answer now, I can go find it. So, you know, let's see. I got some words of the day. A-N-A-S-T-E-N-A-I. This is anastemi. That's a word that I had before, to stand up. And we're going to see it in the context of anastemi ek nekros. Anastemi ek nekros, from the dead. To stand up from the dead. And I didn't look up that other word. I can't remember. Anybody ever remember what that other word is?
We had agora in the agora.
Yeah, it's to stand up in the agora, but it's I don't want to say agorastemi, but it's something close to that. You know, it's not anastemi, which means to stand up, and it doesn't. And the connotation of anastemi is not from the dead, but this context of that other word, erastemi, that context of the other word is literally to stand up in the marketplace with an exclamation on the fact that it's from the dead. But remember, you have to always add in Greek ek nekros, from the death, from phantos, from nekros, to make, because there is no word. Okay, we'll go back again. There is no word in any language to resurrect until English, or until after Jesus. And then we get a word for resurrection. Why? That's obvious.
Never happened before.
It never ever happened before. And I know that your professors will tell you, okay, oh, there was myth cycle that had people raising from the dead all the time. They're lying to you. Tell them to prove it. Because remember what happened? Who was the closest that came back from the dead in Greek thought? Remember?
Lazarus.
No, in Greek thought, in Greek myth. Who was the closest?
He went down to get his girlfriend, was it?
Yeah, it was Eurydice and the guy. The guy went down to Hades to get his girlfriend, right?
Orpheus.
Remember? What's that?
Orpheus.
Orpheus, exactly. Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah, that was
Eurydice.
Yeah.
In the Italian, it would be a Eurydice.
Eurydice, yeah, Italian. In Greek, it's a little more guttural, but that's okay.
Yeah.
She was supposed to be a sweet girl, and he went to Hades to get her. She's probably like in bad shape. But anyway, remember, he brought her all the way to the edge of Hades, and the thing that she wasn't supposed to do is don't what?
He couldn't look back to see if she was following him.
Don't look back, right. I think it was she doesn't look back.
No, it was Orpheus. He had to lead the way out, and she had to be following him. And if he looked back, then she was stuck.
In any case, did she come back? No. And remember, what's her name? The girl, the reason for the seasons. The reason for the seasons. Remember the reason for the seasons? Demeter's daughter, who was the bride of Pluto, the bride of Hades. What was her name? Anyway, she had to return to Hades, right? Because she'd eaten the pomegranate. Remember that? No one in Greek thought or myth ever came back from Hades. Now, what about the next closest? How about the Egyptians? Anybody come back from the dead in Egyptian thought? The closest was Osiris. And Osiris, he couldn't come back because all of his body parts had been chopped up and thrown away, and they never found his one part. And it was replaced with a wooden rod by his wife. but he's miming. He never was alive again, because he never found his other part. So he's, supposedly his wife is still looking for his other part. I'm not kidding. This is, okay? So anybody come back from the dead in Egyptian myth cycle? Nope.
Still working on it.
The only place that people came back from the dead was in the Mysterion after, guess what event? The resurrection of Jesus Christ. All of a sudden, after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, we suddenly see in the myth cycles of the Mysterions. Bingo! People raised from the dead all over the place. Yeah.
Just a couple questions. Do we consider the widow's son, Elijah, laid on top of and reanimated? Was that coming back from the dead? And what about the man who was thrown into Elisha's grave, and as soon as his dead body hit Elisha's bones, he came back to life? Is that...
Generally, when we talk about myth cycle and someone coming back from the dead, it's because they come back from the dead. They're reanimated, usually because of their actions or the actions of the gods indirectly. Because it's not unusual to find, not necessarily in historical sources, not till late, okay? Late we start to find in historical sources the idea of resurrection. Now, how did they really view, for example, Elisha? Was it Elisha first?
Elisha was second.
The first one, Elijah, the young boy that was brought back.
Right.
Okay, how do you think that it was viewed in the ancient world?
It may not have been dead.
It may not have been dead, or it was that Elijah basically kept his spirit. Remember, in Hebraic thought, there's only two parts, right? You got breath and you got sarx. You got the body. And so in Hebraic thought, there is no soul. So what did he retain for the child? The breath, the nefesh. And so in their view, culturally, it would be that he retained the breath nefesh, and therefore he was reanimated, right?
Wasn't dead 3 days either.
There's a question. He's dead. There's other things, right, that we look at historically. Now, how do we view that same historical incident? What is our view of it?
Our view is that he was dead.
And resurrected, right? But the reason we see that is because what is the lens of our blinders?
The resurrection of Christ.
That there is a resurrection possible. When you have an idea in your culture that resurrection is an impossibility, right? Then all of a sudden when someone hits you in the side of the head with, someone came back from the dead and we saw it, right? What do you have to do? Well, you have three choices. What do? 3 choices.
Deny it.
Right. You can disbelieve it and say, it can't happen because even if it did happen, I can't agree that it happens because that would blow my idea of the world, right? So it can't happen. Bingo. Remember what they said in Athens? Some of us will not believe, right? We will not agree. We will not be convinced and agree. Some will say what?
They will accept it.
Well, some will accept it and say, yeah, this, it happened, it's a historical event, I don't know what it means, tell me what it means, right? And that's where you begin to be convinced. Some will say what? There's another group. You saw them at Athens. The other group will say,
Wasn't dead at all.
well, no, they'll say, I want to hear more about that, right? I'm not convinced now, but I'm weighing the options. See, some will say, I can't believe it because it can't exist because it's outside of my realm of even thinking. Some will say, well, let me hear later because, I want to hear more about this argument. And some will say, yeah, I agree, or I'm convinced, you see? And that's what we saw in Athens. When Paul responded at Athens, when he gave his famous preaching at, Mars Hill, that was, the 3 things that they said happened. In the Jewish community, there weren't that many options. But, so it goes. But what's really important to note is that until this happened until this resurrection thing happened, no one imagined that anybody could be resurrected in the world. You know, it hadn't happened. And then it happens, and now what? It's kind of like in literature or science or whatever. What happens when somebody creates a brand new idea? It's a really cool idea. Well, copycats, right? Yeah, copycats. So, you know, all of a sudden you get all kinds of wizards in children's literature and all kinds of vampire stories, right? And all kinds of zombie stories. You notice that? Somebody writes one book and it gets published and everybody likes it and all of a sudden there's a gazillion books like it, see? So this is what happens in human cultures and societies. So it shouldn't be odd to us, but what happens is we should look at it culturally and historically and say and see how it happened. So like I said, when you talk to your professors, challenge your professors. A-K-O-L-O-E-T-H-E-I-T-O. Akoletheo. This is a really cool word because koletheo. The A particle is union. This can be a negation or a union. And so this means a union, and this means in the same way. Akoletheo. Okay, remember teen hodos, the way. Koletheo means basically going along in the same way. So when we see this word in Mark, and we'll see it, remember Mark's writing about teen hodos. This is just another word and another way of expressing the idea of teen hodos. So it's kind of cool.
Could that mean like follower when you say going along in the same way? Could that be a follow?
You see, in our way of thinking, you either what? Follow or lead, right? That's our culture. You're either a leader or a follower, right? Okay, you can't be anything in between. Well, that's not the way the world is, guys, and that's not the way ancient cultures are, especially in Hebraic thought. In Hebraic thought, when the rabbi starts moving, what do the rabbinical disciples do? They move too. Why? Are they following? Are they leading?
Or just going the same way?
They are accompanying. They would not say they're following, nor would they say they're leading. How about in Greek thought? In ancient Greek thought, okay, there's three types of schools in Greek thought. There's a lyceum, where you kind of get together and you discuss things like, you know, philosophy, theology, whatever. You sit there and discuss. Is there a leader in a lyceum? Nope, no leader. You have the shola. In the shola, you pay. You pay to go. And so you're paying a teacher to teach. That's very similar to the Latin or the Roman ideal. That's the way the Roman world worked, right? And then you have the gymnasium. In the gymnasium, you're working out with weights, and at the same time, you're reading your philosophical text, right? And by the way, there's also the piastra. There's a sacrifice there for you to share in because you're working out for the Olympics. So the three different types of schools in the lyceum, which is the school, right? In the lyceum or the gymnasium, which are basic Greek schools. Is there a leader or a teacher? No. Socrates just happens to go in there, and you listen to Socrates. Why? Did you pay him? Nope. Why do you listen to Socrates? He's got ideas you might listen to. Is he leading or following? Or are you leading or following?
Depends.
It depends, but see, that's our cultural view. In a Greek view, you're just there. You're participating with him, right? He's not a teacher, he's not a leader. You're listening, and if you find an idea you like, say, cool, I like that idea, right? And then you may go off with it, see? But that's the way the Greek world is. Now, how about the Roman world? How's the Roman world? Our world is the Roman world, in large measure.
I want to get my money's worth, I paid for it.
In the Roman world,
You conquer or conquer.
you're conqueror or conquered. That's right. You're a leader or you're a follower. If you're not a leader, then get back and follow. If you're not a follower, get up and lead, right? That's our culture. But that's not the real world. We're kind of coming back to that. You ever heard about lead from behind and things like that? You know, these are what do you call them? Just, you know, buzzwords, right? They become buzzwords. But there is some truth to them, right? It's just going back to the future. S-T-A-U-R-O-N. Stauron, that's not the guy that was in Lord of the Rings. Stauros is a post or a stake, and specifically, this is an execution stake. We translate it cross, but it is specifically an execution stake, and it has a lot of connotations in the ancient world. In the ancient world, you just didn't crucify people. In the ancient world, less often, very often in Oriental cultures, but less often within these cultures, but they still did it. They impale people, which is a horrible death. They tied them up on stakes and just let them die. They whipped them to death or beat them to death, you know, on stakes. There's lots of different ways that they punish people with an execution stake. And so this is translated cross, but it has many connotations and not just simply a cross. A-R-A-T-O, arato, ario, to lift up, to take away, to rise, to sail away. And you notice I gave you a Strong's Divine that says by Hebraism to expiate sin. That's kind of funny because you take a very concrete word in Greek and you turn it into a magic word in Hebrew. But in any case, we see this word again. This is cool word, A-P-A-R-N-E-S-A-S-T-H-O. Let's see, how do you pronounce this? Arapathemo. This means off negative and rero, which means to speak. So this means to deny, to off not tell a story, off rero. So to deny something is factual. In other words, think of this as you're a witness to a crime, and you patently deny any knowledge of or whatever the story was. And then this word is the one I said I should have given you last time. Apiso. Apiso. That's the word that we get optio. The optio in a century. Here's a centurion. The centurion stands here. The sentry are all here. The guy carrying the signum, the guy carrying the sentry's the guidon, yes, that's correct. The guidon stands here. The guidon is the guy who measures where your walk is. You know, he's the one who starts the pace and the count according to what the centurion tells him to do. The Libreus is usually here. The Libreus is the lowest rank. He's the guy that keeps and the Tesarius is usually, I can't remember which corner he's in. I can't remember if he's here or here. The Tesarius, you know, the point is to make the corners, right? And then the optio is over here, because the optio kind of moves around, but the optio is like the first sergeant of the legion, of the century, and his job is to make sure you do what?
Keep in step.
Keep in step and keep in order. So he's going along and he's saying, "Hey, pick it. Okay, come on, change step." Right? He's making sure that they're in the proper step. And who carries the baton? He carries the baton until he has to go to headquarters and report or do whatever he's doing for the day. And then who does he give the baton to? The optio carries the baton when the centurion is away. And by the way, only a centurion or the optio can carry the baton. Why do you have a baton? What is the purpose of the baton? There's two. Number one, it's the indicator of your rank. But number two, it is a weapon. And by the way, we used to do that too. You ever heard of a swagger stick? Yes. The swagger sticks were used in the military until, well, even after the turn of the century, but up to World War I. They stopped doing it in World War II most of the time. But they were used to strike, usually enlisted personnel. Because the point was that from the idea of the baton, this is an idea that has been with us from almost the beginning of warfare. That the way you kept your troops in line, if you needed to, was you used corporeal force to get them in line.
So Patton was innocent.
Well, did Patton carry that because he had originally come from the horse brigades, the cavalry? Or
What's that?
did Patton carry a swagger stick because he came from the cavalry, or as a holdover from Greek or Roman?
He lived in his mind in the ancient world.
Everyone believed, no, he did it because they did it. Everyone believes that a lot of it, well, the impression that we have is that people carried swagger sticks because it was a cavalry thing. It was not a cavalry thing. Because what did you carry if you were a cavalry guy?
Sword.
Well, you had a sword, but what did you have for your horse?
To beat the horse.
What's
go
that?
faster.
A whip. Yes, you had a horse whip. You had a small horse whip, like that. It was not a swagger stick. A swagger stick is made of strong wood.
Lightweight, you couldn't hurt someone with it.
Well, it was,
Barely hurt someone with it.
the batons that they used in the ancient world were usually about 1.25 inches. They were pretty thick, and they were usually had metal on them. They were intended to hurt.
Yeah, it would hurt.
And if you read my book, Centurion, they used it liberally, and they use it quite a lot in training. All right? Now, in the modern era, one of the reasons they stopped using swagger... Why do you think they stopped using swagger sticks in the modern era?
They still have a baton, though.
What's
They
that?
still carry a baton.
They might carry a baton, but why do they stop hitting people with swagger sticks?
Was it politically correct?
Nope. Because what did they start carrying in World War I and World War II and the Civil War?
Rifles.
Rifles. And the problem with a rifle is that if you have one shot, are you going to use it on your officer? Probably not. If you have multi-shots and the guy really irritates you, what's going to happen?
Defend yourself.
You're gonna kill somebody you could
You're-
use later.
You're going to kill him. That's right. And that's what happened. In World War I, when they had, the bolt-action rifles with multi-shots, they'd find that, the guy comes along the row in the trenches, and these guys have been sitting there in the mold, and their feet are rotting off, and they're, dying every day, and they're basically barely able to get a cigarette, and they're hungry, and the guy comes up and says, "Buck up, soldier." Bang! That's all she wrote. So, about World War I is when they stopped using the swagger stick. So, it's a great thing to have when you're armed equally, but it's not a good thing to have when you're using lasers and blasters, right? So, probably, it's purely reasonable why we went away from that. But what you got to realize is, what I want you to know is the optio. The optio is like the first sergeant of a century, and that's where this word. This is the origins of this word, apicio. Apiso. Okay, so let's go to. Here we go, right to it. 33. I'm going to just go to 33. And remember, this comes right after the thing in 8. So we're looking at, they said, Jesus says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says quite the opposite. We expect, the Greek reader would expect him to say, "You're God," but he says, "No, you're the Christus. You're the anointed one." And then he rebukes Peter. Jesus turned in 8:33, Jesus turned and looked at his disciples. He rebuked eptimeo, Peter. Hupageo, lead yourself, not get. It's lead yourself apicio. Lead yourself episio. He just told the optio to do what?
Take the baton.
No, he didn't tell him to take the baton. He told him to get into your position in the legion, in the century. Right? In other words, Peter was where? If this is a century, and remember this is Greek, very concrete. So if I'm the century, where is Peter right now?
Right next to you.
He's right next to this guy, and he's basically telling Jesus, Jesus, you know, this isn't the right military plan. This isn't the way we should be doing this. This isn't what we should be doing. And Jesus just told him what?
Back in line.
Get back in your position. It's just like, you know, in a Greek person reading this in that century, because he used this word apiso, and he also used the word hupego, lead yourself. Lead yourself. Why lead yourself? You know, if it's a normal legionnaire, what would you tell a normal legionnaire?
Follow.
Well, if it's a normal legionnaire, you take your baton and do what with it?
Crack them with the
Yeah, smack him over the head. And then you tell the thesaurus to pick him up. Right? Pick him up and drag him. You know, so the thesaurus is dragging this guy, you know, by his leg. You see what I'm saying? So a normal legionnaire, so when that's why I don't like many times the way that we've translated this and the way we express this. Because Jesus didn't take anything away from Peter, did he? Right? He just told him to get back in his position. Do what you're supposed to do. And what's really interesting, again, I told you this before, he's called him Satanus. So from this, and I said last week, what can we take from that? What is Jesus telling Satan to do?
Do the same thing, get in your own place.
Get in your place. Get in your place. Now we're going to see it in the context. You do not have in mind, you literally, ferano, the exercise of mind of the things of God, but the things of man. That's what he said to him. That's the thing we didn't get to last week. You do not have in mind, you do not, ferano, exercise your mind about the things of God, but the things of men. This is a huge declaration, a huge separation between what Peter, remember I told you? He didn't rebuke Peter. He rebuked Peter because Peter was wanting Jesus to be that Messiah that was the king. The anointed one is supposed to be the king and high priest. And so Peter's expecting him to be the king and high priest and take over Jerusalem and kick out the Greeks and kick out the Romans, right? And Jesus just told Peter, what's important is not the kingship and the high priesthood. What's important is what God intends to do with it. And that is the focus of the rest of the whole book of Mark. The whole rest of Mark is a logo to telos, a legos to telos of this idea. Who is this anointed guy? And what does it mean? What's the purpose? And so we look at 34. So I want you to note, when we read this account, what do we do when we reach 34? What do we put there? I mean, you may even have it in your Bible. Is there a paragraph mark there? Is there a separation?
Yes, there are the three.
Why did we put a separation there? Is there a separation? We in English thinking want to put a separation between the rebuke of Peter and what's going to happen next. There is none. Remember, in the Greek, it all runs together. But let's look at this as an idea, as a thought. Because Jesus he turned to the disciples and he rebuked Peter and the disciples. He rebuked them all. Why did he rebuke the disciples too, as well as Peter?
Because they were thinking along the same lines.
Exactly. They're thinking the same thing. Remember, he rebuked the disciples, Peter, and Satan. Which, you know, if you were making a movie, and I think they did, you know, you would expect Satan to be in the background on that picture, right? Mm-hmm. So here's Jesus turned to the disciples, and here's the disciples, Peter, and Satan. Whether figuratively or real. I think it's concrete because it's Greek. In any case, then he does what? He calls pro skalemoi. He calls toward himself the crowd, the throng. So He's talking to the disciples, and the next moment he calls the people. In our view, this and this are separate. In Mark's view, this and this are the same. So what are we going to now hear? What do you expect to hear now? An explanation of what it means for the anointed. So let's see what it says. Then he called the throng, the crowd, to him along with his disciples, and epo, and said, past tense, if anyone would come, ak koletho, would come in the way with me. Get it? Get it? If anyone would come in the way with me, tinoros, the same way, apiso, as an apiso. Get what he says. If anyone would come in the way with me, the way, as an apiso, he's literally saying, as what?
This is more of a leader,
Yeah.
not just a follower.
Yeah, not just a follower. You know, we take this as just a following, right? But this word is apiso. Here's the centurion. Here's Christ. And he just called you, he's calling the disciples. Look, he did not even include the disciples. He told Peter to apisio, right? And he's still an apisio if he did what? He's an apisio if he does what?
He leads.
Well, if he does what Jesus told him to do, right? Get back and do your job. And so Jesus says, if anyone wants to go in the way with me, as an apisio, as someone in command with me, doing what I'm doing, right? He must deny, this word, utterly deny himself, and lift up, arata, his staros, his execution state, and go in the same way with me. Now, maybe this isn't so much different from what our understanding of it is in English, but I think it is phenomenally powerful in what he just said. Because what Jesus said, number one, he told us, you know, Peter said, you're the anointed one, and Jesus said, don't tell anybody. And then he began to teach about the Son of Man, which is the anointed one, right? And now he's telling us, when Peter rebukes him, he just got the crowd together, got the disciples together, and he told them, if you want to go with me, in other words, if you want to follow in leadership the anointed one, the Son of Man, right? Then you have to lift up this execution stake, whatever that means. We know in retrospect what it means, and we know that Jesus already told them that the Son of Man has to die, right? Be harmed, die, and then be resurrected. Now, I want you also to note this. If you're going along in the way with Jesus, it means that you're going along and you carry your execution stake, we'll draw it as a cross, and then you die. And if Jesus dies and is resurrected, what happens to you?
I'll follow along.
Right? Now we, in our figurative sense, we've got this figuratively figured out. In the Greek, it's very concrete, right? You're literally going to carry your execution stake, or a possibility is you're going to carry your execution stake, die, and be resurrected. And what did we turn this into? I'm not going to say we turned this into. What was this turned into? I mean, what is this within the context of Christianity?
Baptism.
Yeah. So here's baptism and resurrected with him, right? I mean, our impression, our idea is that Jesus is, you know, in a concrete fashion, Jesus is calling us, just like he's calling those guys, to be willing to pick up your execution stake and go with Jesus, right? With the possibility of death and resurrection. See? But within a Christian context, within the historical context, this means to do what? To follow him as a leader, to be willing to die, and the death that we get is what? The baptism. But this is a later idea. So just keep that in mind. The point I'm making is this. You know, we read this in English, and our impression is it's what? Impossible. Isn't that your impression? It's impossible, isn't it? How many people do you know carrying their excuses to resurrect? Right? To us, it's an impossibility. This means that it's what in Greek? It is a paradox. This is also in Mark. We're going to get into paradox after paradox after paradox. Because this is how Jesus teaches. Let's see what he says, okay? Let's go on. Let's see, I've got any more. I have a note to myself. This is just a beautiful construction in the Greek that we kind of butcher in English, but that's all right. In 35. What's that?
In all this, he's asking us not to just be brain-numb followers, but previously you were telling us learn like the Pharisees learn and take control of the teaching. Now to follow me like a sergeant into battle, and not just brain-dead followers, brainwashed followers or something like that, but to actually be active participants.
That is a beautiful summation. Right? Let's even go further and note that it wasn't, he said it specifically to Peter, like right to his face, right, and to the disciples, but then he called all the people. And so it wasn't just the disciples and Peter that could be those leaders, you know, like the Optio. It's all of them. You know, and you might ask yourself, then who are the followers?
It's the way.
It's the way, exactly. You see, you know, you don't need any followers. As a matter of fact, you expect the Optio. The Optio doesn't have a place in the formation because the Optio's purpose is to make sure everything is happening correctly. What happens if everybody's an Optio? Is that good in a Greek worldview?
No.
Why?
Well,
Yes.
They're all trying to find out that everything's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, if everyone is doing what they're supposed to do, everyone can be doing something a little different, right? But they're all going in the way together, see? If everybody is an Optio, then everyone can help everybody, right? If I'm equal to you, which, by the way, that's the whole point in the ecclesia idea, that we are not, I'm not a leader and you're a follower. In the idea of the ecclesia, the church, you know, from the New Testament, we all have the same stature. You know, just because you're a priest or because you're this or an elder or that, you don't have a higher status to anyone else. Everybody is an Optio. Nobody is a centurion except Christ. See? So in the view of Mark, we're all going along together in the way, together. And if everybody's an Optio, I can go to Daniel and say, Daniel, keep me in step. Right? And my step's right and his step's right. We're both stepping the right way because we're all going in the way the same way. We can help each other. We can be Optios to each other. You know, this is totally adverse to our view of the world. In our view of the world, somebody's got to be leading, somebody's got to follow. You got to have a priest, you got to have an elder, you got to have, right? That is not the worldview of the ecclesia. That's not the worldview of the Greek world. And so in this worldview, you know, we're going together. We're all the same. And the only leader is this guy, Jesus. Beautiful stuff. 35. Here we're getting deep into paradox. Well, I shouldn't say that yet. For whoever wants to suzo his life. And this is not life. This is, okay, we got sarx. We got suke. and we got pneuma. Which word do you think we're talking about here? Suke. Someone wants to say, and you know, in English, we just took a word that doesn't mean life in the sense of life. It means the breath of the being, right? It's not the sarx, it's not pneuma, it's your thoughts. So let's put it this way. For whoever wants to save his mental breath of life, in other words, his thoughts, will aplomai, it will be completely destroyed. Whoever wants to save his mental thoughts will be completely destroyed. But whoever destroys his thoughts on account of me and for the evangelion, the good news from the gods, will save it. This is a paradox, but what does it mean from a concrete standpoint? What does it mean? What does this mean in Greek when I say that I will destroy my thoughts?
You're submitting yourself to Christ's authority.
Bingo, exactly. And what's amazing about this is, look, we want to take these little pithy sayings and say, Jesus is making pithy sayings, right? He's not. This is a logos to telos. So the logos to telos is the rebuking, first, who am I? It's hard to recount this, but who am I? This is what the Son of Man does. Then rebuking and telling them to get into the optio position, calling the people to be optios, and then telling them, you must submit your thoughts to God, right? To the Son of Man. Whoever that is, to the Son of Man. By submitting your thoughts, now you are willing to do what? Pick up your cross, your staros, your execution stake, and follow. Go in the way of, right? And by the way, go in the way of no matter what happens. That's the point. This is a paradox, but you notice how beautiful this is in the Greek? And by the way, I would say how obvious it is in the Greek, right? I mean, it takes a little brain power to get to it, but brain power is okay, right? You see what I'm saying? Because the Greeks say suke because what do they think you're always doing? You're always supposed to be thinking, right? When you stop thinking, you're dead. See, that's why I'm not into this transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation, has anybody ever done transcendental meditation? If anyone has done it and ever has achieved zero thoughts, that means you're dead. Okay? The thing I hear from transcendental meditation people, that unless you're on drugs, you never can stop your brain from thinking. And that's one of the things that the Rajas say all the time. It's almost impossible to stop yourself from thinking. Well, duh, right? That's why in Christianity, how do we do meditation? What's the meditation in Christianity? And Judaism, by the way. Prayer. Exactly. Instead of wasting your thoughts, you turn them to, you submit them to, right? Anyway, I just love this. This is beautiful stuff. 36. What benefit? What ophthalemo? They say good, but it's what benefit? Ophthalemo. What benefit is it for a man to kerideto, to gain the whole world? And by the way, it's not world. It's the whole cosmos. The whole of creation. Literally the whole of creation. And yet forfeit his suke. Well, they say soul, but it's not soul. Soul would, most precisely, soul would be pneuma. But you notice how they just translated suke as life, and then they translated suke as soul. Well, guys, make up your mind. It's one or the other, right? I mean, what are you thinking here? See, this is why I kind of get irritated at our translators, because they're not telling us what they're doing. They're just throwing stuff out. And literally, if you are to translate it the way they translate it, does it mean the same thing? No, it doesn't mean the same thing at all. Now, maybe we could take theologically the same kind of ideas from it, but it's not the same thing. Because Jesus is not talking about the eternal soul. What is he talking about?
Current thinking.
He's talking about your thinking. Yeah, your thinking. This goes back to, remember, Paul's solution for all your problems in life is to do what? Remember from all the Pauline letters we studied? What?
Get your mind right.
Get your mind right. Yeah, think. See? And Jesus is a good Greek guy. Okay, good Greek thinker. So Jesus, along with all the other Greek philosophers, is standing in the same line. All the Greek philosophers would say to do what? To think about it. Now maybe they're thinking about it's weird and wrong, but they would still say, think about it. And that's what Jesus is telling us. We take from it, we misconstrue this, because the words we use in English are very specific, constrained, and mean something in English that they don't mean in Greek at all. It's not the life they're talking about. It's your thoughts. It's not the soul they're talking about. It's your thoughts. What good benefit is a man to gain the whole world, the cosmos, the creation, and yet forfeit his thoughts? Now here is a paradox. What is the paradox that we suddenly are confronted with this? If Jesus told you in the previous paragraph, the previous statement, to basically submit your thoughts to the Son of Man, one would argue in English that I have done what to my own thoughts? I've given them up so they're not mine anymore, right? But remember, the context of this is that you and I all want to follow in the way. We're not leading, right? There's only one leader, the centurion. He's leading. And we are all following in the way with him, right? So we all want to go that way. So by submitting our thoughts allows us to do what? To keep in the way. So in other words, you see where this is a beautiful paradox. In other words, we want to do what? Where do we want to go? We all want to go in the way with Jesus, right? We want to go in the way. The paradox is, to go in the way, you've got to submit yourself to him, to the Son of Man, whoever that is. We're going to find out who that is, right? So to do that, you have to submit your thoughts. But at the same time, it's what we want to do. Do you see this? This is a powerful and important paradox. Because remember what Paul said? I do those things that I don't want to do. What does he want to do?
He wants to stay in the way.
He wants to stay in the way. That's what he wants to do, right? And Paul would say to do that, you have to think, suke, right? You have to submit your thoughts to Christ, to the Son of Man at this point, right? This is exactly that same kind of message. This is exactly the same kind of thing. It's stated in a Greek paradox. Why is it in a Greek paradox? You'll say to me, but it's a Greek paradox that makes it hard to understand, right? Well, Shazam, yeah. Because the point of a paradox is to do what?
Make you think.
To make you think. Exactly. So if it made you think, if it didn't make you think, then you're getting the wrong thing out of it. You see what I'm saying? If you did make you think, if you're thinking about this, that's the point. See? That's what the whole point of Greek paradox and Greek argument is. Because remember, it doesn't give you a telos. We're not going to have a stated conclusion. But let's see what else it says. It's just beautiful stuff. 37. Or what can a man give in exchange as a ransom? What can a man give as a ransom for his suke? His suke, not his pneuma, his suke. What can a man give as a ransom? Okay, what do you think the next one's going to be about? How about the ransom? He just asked a question. What can a man give as a ransom for his suke? So what do you think he's going to tell us? What the ransom is for your suke. And remember, the context of this is, who is the Son of Man? Right? This is the context, the Son of Man. If anyone, 38, if anyone is ashamed, literally feels shame of me and my argument, my logos, my argument, in this literally adulterous and missed the mark, sinful generation, era, the Son of Man will feel shame of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the hagios angels, the awful angels, the awful messengers of God. He just answered the question for you. What can a man ransom for his suke? Anybody want to pull that out? What the answer is? The answer is to not feel shame for the logos. In other words, to do what with the logos?
Embrace it.
To embrace it, to argue it before man. If you have a logos, okay, maybe some of you have never had a great argument, okay, in your heart, right? A great argument that you want to share with somebody, right? When you have a great argument, you want to go, I want to share this with people, right? So if you have this argument, this logos, that is the logos, it's the evangelion, the good news from the gods. If you feel shame for it, then you have not ransomed it. See? In other words, to submit your thoughts, your suke, it's what you want to do. To feel ashamed of it is the opposite. And that's the ransom. The ransom, the requirement, the ransom is to not feel shame for the logos. And if you don't feel shame for the logos, what does that mean you've done? Well, not feel shame. If you don't feel shame, you have...
You've agreed with the argument.
You've agreed with it, yes. You are, in our words, we say believe, but in the Greek worldview, it is you are convinced of it, right? You totally agree with it, with no reservations. So, we, again, break this, and I'm in 9 here, so we've got just a few seconds. So, we break this in a whole chapter, right? But it's not meant to be broken. We're talking about the same logos. The same logos is this Son of Man. And we just found out what the ransom is. Well, look what he says. And he logos to them in 1. Chapter 9:1. And he logos to them. I logos you the truth. I logos to you the truth. Some who are standing here will not literally taste, phantos, taste death, before they see the bacilla of God, ekromai, come with dunamos. Now, we can skip ahead a little bit and see this, but basically, okay, did those standing there see, some of those standing there see the kingdom of God come with power?
Yes, resurrection.
They surely did. Because the way they saw it was the resurrection. Right? And we can get to that because we'll see that. This is what we call foreshadowing. Mark is foreshadowing the events for us, but this is also that logos to tell us of the Son of Man. Yes, sir?
Now, wasn't this misinterpreted by the disciples to mean that they would see the second coming? And that's why they didn't start writing the Gospels down? Or?
I think that we as Christians have been misinterpreting this from the beginning of the whatever. And I'm not sure why. Okay, I don't know what their profit is in it. Because, yes, you know, we have the idea, or we have the, we'll look to see in Mark if it supports this, because we know that Jesus is coming again, right, in glory. But in the terms of Jesus, in terms of the New Testament, Jesus has already done what?
Already won the battle.
He already came in glory. See, in my opinion, we as Christians have been doing what with this battle?
Still fighting.
Yeah, we're fighting a battle. Yeah, we're minimizing and fighting a battle that was already won 2,000 years ago. you know, we basically should be acting like conquering heroes, and for a long time we did. You know, we were subjugating the world for Christ in a positive way. I mean, we're not out killing people the way ISIS did. You know, we were out convincing people of the Logos. That's the point. See, the minute we get into problems is when we start translating words like Logos as word. It's weird. It's not a word. It's a logical argument. You know? So, yeah. I'm just saying that Jesus came in glory already. And, you know, whether he's coming again is a theological concept, right? Is how you look at the things. And I'm not disagreeing that could be. I'm just saying that's not what this says, right? This doesn't say I'm going to come in glory and I'm going to come in glory again. It says, you people that are standing here, some of you will not be dead and you will see God coming in glory. And see, he's still using secret wordage because we're not going to give the telos, and we're also talking about the Son of Man, that Jesus told him not to tell people the Logos, or not to tell people that he was the anointed one. Remember? So we got to keep this in mind. The rest of Mark is all about this Son of Man thing. Every single point is about who is the Son of Man and what does it mean. So that's the Logos to telos that we're looking at right now. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you'd look after us this week. In your name we pray, amen.